This video continues from part 2b1 and continues to look at note creation techniques. Next up we have patterned notes. Patterned notes are perhaps the most powerful form of note taking. Here we take words and we connect them in non-linear ways. On the left hand side we have a mind map, starting with that one central idea, from which other ideas are branching out further and further and further. There's no sentences here, there's just words, phrases and key ideas. It's inherently colourful and fun, and it's supposed to reflect the kind of neural networks we have in our brain. Information sparing out from that central point, the key ideas are the next level in, and then the points underneath are that further detail. You can evolve mind maps into whatever style you wish, but the key idea is that centrality branching out to smaller, branching out to smaller, branching out to smaller. If you can make them colourful and illustrated, even better. On the right hand side we've got a concept map, and a concept map is really based on having several central ideas that are interlinked in different ways, and again that makes them really good for showing connections and hierarchies. These can be hand drawn on paper, or you can find a whole range of apps available on tablets and computers that can help you do this. So how to use them in practice? Well, beforehand, have a go. Try using this approach. I quite often recommend starting with reading, so make a couple of mind maps for a journal article or for a chapter that you've read. Just get a feel for the process and help speed it up a little bit before you try and do it in a lecture or any other live situation. If you are going to use an app or a computer, put a big focus on learning how to use any software. You don't want to be new to software when you walk in to use that for the first time round. While you are using pattern notes, you should focus on showing connections and relationships, but being brief and showing those hierarchies. Afterwards, as you've guessed, do something else with those notes, revisit them, and reprocess them into something else to help aid you with your learning. Next up we have the Cornell note-taking technique, and this is a more active way of taking notes. You can see on this slide we've got a couple of examples. The first is for a lecture and the second is for reading. But the principle's the same. Let's take the lecture notes first. Here we have a Q column where we put the main ideas, key points, questions, gaps and categories. On the right hand side, our main note-taking area. In that note-taking area you can use linear or patterned notes, and that's generally where you record the key elements, key ideas and your thoughts and connections throughout the situation. On the right hand side, anything that's important or needs flagging, add it into that Q column. Looking at the right hand side for using Cornell for your reading, you can see you divide it into an active reading area and a passive reading area. Your passive reading area are the important passages, the paraphrasing, maybe the copy and paste quotes or a duplicate of a diagram. On the left hand side, however, you have your active reading area. Here you write your questions, your thoughts, the notes about inconsistencies or connections to prior learning, things that you might need to look up elsewhere, any reactions that you might agree or disagree with. For both approaches, you'll notice there's a summary area at the bottom. And the point with this is that you would put those notes down and walk away for a day or two, and then revisit them and do a summary. That could be a very small mind map with a few key words, a short paragraph summary, or 2 or 3 bullet points. The great thing about Cornell is it forces, well, at least encourages you to revisit your notes and use them in a different way. You could even cut the bottom of those sheets off and use those summaries as later revision cue cards. If you're using Cornell notes, well, there's no real prep beforehand other than drawing some lines, but you can find Cornell lined notebooks available in most stationers. During, you should really focus on filling in the notes section and some of those cues. I quite often like to use symbols, an exclamation mark for something important, an @ symbol for something I need to look up later, and a question mark for something I don't understand and I might want to revisit. And then afterwards, come back and fill in those cue columns and active reading sections, and then again leave some time and fill in your summaries, preferably a day or two later. The final technique we're going to look at very briefly is Scott Young's flow technique. Flow notes are about learning and not recording, so it tends to be a very different and very organic way of recording notes. You may organise things in and around diagrams and visuals if possible, but you should hierarchy them in a way that makes sense to you. So traditional notes tend to be organised by what you've read or what lecture this is, and you might have a separate notebook for different modules and start a fresh page with each lecture. With the flow note taking technique, you do this in a different way, in a way that makes sense to you. You may organise your notes thematically, so you dip between a lecture and then a seminar and then some reading that you've got. Obviously you'd acknowledge the major source, but it's trying to blend together those thoughts in a way that makes sense to you. You may actually go back and forwards writing on pages, so if you're in lecture 4 and something comes up that connects to a previous thing, you might actually go back a few pages and start writing there instead. Again, you're trying to represent your learning. You're not reproducing the order or thoughts of somebody else. This is all about you. You don't need to be artistic for this. It can just be words, lines, shapes and arrows, and here again is an example of this. This is just a different way of representing those ideas and connections. And actually, it's quicker and more effective than writing full sentences. It's really easy at a glance to see the key points on this page. There's probably a few rules that we can distill from the flow technique. You should emphasise important details, focus on new ideas, and omit or downplay the irrelevant. So, for example, if your lecturer's talking about something you're really confident in and you passed very well at A-level, you don't need to write about that. Save that headspace and real estate on your page for the new. Write down and draw in your own words according to your mental picture, not the phrasing of other people. So this takes paraphrasing to a whole new level. You can add new information anywhere. It doesn't have to be on a page for a lecture or a notebook for just your reading. It's wherever makes sense to you, and draw in those connections backwards and forwards to show how things interrelate. It's absolutely possible to do this in a notebook, but again, you'll probably find it a little bit more dynamic and easier in a digital format. So, how do we use the flow method? Well, before, there's not much to do. It's just keeping on with this and keep interplaying and revisiting and using the same technique. During, focusing on the new and meaningful. And afterwards, keep it as a working document and a living document. Not just looking at it, but going back and rewriting and revisiting and relinking. It's an organic document that builds and reflects upon your learning. We're now at the end of the video, and I'd encourage you to go and try some of those techniques out. Maybe watch a couple of YouTube videos and give them a go before you try them in a lecture, or use them for your next journal or chapter reading. Just try something different. So, what's next up? The next video in this series is a real short one, and it just focuses on how you can keep your notes useful, and I hope to see you in it. But, as always, don't forget to follow us on social media for news, skills tips and other helpful information. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Hopefully see you there.